If you were to ask me what my favorite class is, I would easily answer geography. Well, why geography? It's one of the most boring classes. Well, not when you have the world's best geography teacher. Let me tell you about how my geography teacher, Mr. Van Ziel, changed how I view environmental conservation. It was late September, and I was sitting in class. Last class, Mr. Van Ziel told us how we would be starting our unit on rare earth minerals. So I was getting comfortable to doze off when my ears perked at the word solar panels. And I thought, well, what do rare earth minerals have to do with solar panels? Well, it turns out that rare earth minerals are a vital component of creating sustainable energy. And from an environmental standpoint, that's the price you have to pay to have a clean environment. And it'll be all worth it once we solve climate change. So I was getting comfortable again once Mr. Van Ziel said, what we need is not solar panels, nor wind turbines, but we need nuclear energy. Huh? I gasped. I couldn't believe that he was spreading this anti-environmentalist propaganda to my class. Before I could fight back, Mr. Van Ziel told me, 50% of America's energy is powered by nuclear energy, and only 3% comes from solar panels. This statistic left me shocked. Later that day, as I lay in bed procrastinating, I started researching as to whether what Mr. Van Ziel said was true. Because how could it be? One of the world's largest solar farms is located in America, and that itself must provide at least 50% of America's energy, right? Well, after hours of digging, reading, and researching, I was fully convinced that the future is not green, but it is nuclear. So, before my world was flipped around, I had a strong viewpoint on the need for green energy. I was concerned that global warming would destroy many natural habitats that people work so hard to preserve, and that the technological solutions were quite simple. Solar panels on every roof, electric cars in every vehicle, in every driveway, and that the major challenges were political. So I continued to advocate for green energy. In my quest, I traveled to different countries to speak with other youth to learn how they were making impactful changes in their communities. Yet the more I learned about the world's energy needs, the more I realized the limitations of these sources. I soon learned about nuclear energy's efficiency, relatively low environmental impact, and incredible potential for providing large-scale clean energy. And this was a turning point for me. And so the big question of our time becomes, how do we get plentiful, reliable energy and electricity without hurting climate? We think that the solution is renewable energies like solar panels and wind turbines. I'm here to tell you why that's absolutely wrong. But first, we need to discuss the pros and cons. While investigating renewable energies, I started to come across some challenges. Wind turbines and solar farms are responsible for the death of many threatened and endangered bird species. In fact, wind turbines are one of the biggest threats that they face today. And in terms of solar farms, building a solar farm is like building any other kind of farm. You have to clear the whole area of wildlife. This is California's largest solar farm, called Island. Current estimates are that about 6,000 birds are killed every year, actually catching on fire above of the solar farm and plunging to their death, or mistaking the glare of a solar panel for the glare of a lake and burning alive. All of this raises a really uncomfortable question. In the effort to try to save the climate, are we destroying the environment? And it gradually struck me that technical advancements can't change the fundamental unreliability of these sources. You can't make the sun shine more regularly or the wind blow more reliably. all the problems with renewables aren't technical, they're natural. And we've been hearing a lot about how the prices of wind turbines and solar panels have come down in cost in recent years. But that cost has been significantly outweighed by the challenges of actually integrating that energy onto the grid. Take, for instance, what's happened in California. In the period in which solar panels and wind turbines have come down in cost, we've seen electricity prices go up 5 times more than the rest of the country. And this phenomenon is not unique. We also see this happening in Germany, one of the world's leaders of green energy. Their prices have increased a whopping 50% during their big renewable energy push. German electricity is now about twice as expensive as France's. And you might think it's a small price to pay when dealing with climate change. And I would agree. While higher costs when dealing with climate action seem reasonable to prevent global warming, this still represents a significant price difference. But the interesting thing is that when you compare France and Germany regarding their electricity, France gets 91% of its electricity from clean energy, from hydro and nuclear. And Germany receives only 46% of its electricity from clean sources, including solar and wind. And here's the real shocking truth. German carbon emissions have actually been increasing since 2009. Consider the case of France gets twice as much of its electricity from clean zero-emission sources than Germany, and yet they pay half as much for their electricity. Well, how can that be? Well, France gets most of its electricity from nuclear, which is much more reliable, generating energy 24/7. Now, what about the environmental impact? Uranium fuel, which is used to power nuclear energy, is really energy dense, requiring minimal land for significant energy production. If you compare Ivanpah with California's Diablo Canyon, it takes 450 times more land to generate the exact same of electricity. In addition to the amount of land required, studies show that solar panels need 17 times more materials, like cement, glass, and concrete, than nuclear plants. Solar energy produces 300 times more waste than nuclear, often containing toxic metals. In contrast, all the waste from Switzerland's nuclear program can fit into this room. And the great thing about nuclear waste is it's the only waste from electricity production that's safely contained. All other forms from electricity production release into the atmosphere. On top of that, there's absolutely no plan to recycle solar panels outside of the EU at the end of their 20 to 25-year life. Experts worry that solar panels may end up in poor countries in Africa or Asia. Like the rest of our electronic waste stream, where dismantling them exposes those people to toxic chemicals like lead, cadmium, and chromium. Not only are these poor countries affected by the toxic fumes of dismantling them, but also the process required to build them, including the exploitation of vulnerable people. Cobalt, one of the world's rare earth minerals, is a vital component of solar panels and wind turbines, and is extracted from the Democratic Republic of Congo. This mining has severe consequences. Villages are destroyed, displacing thousands who then have no choice but to work in these mines. The work is dangerous, poorly paid, and often done by women and children without the proper equipment. This industry causes deforestation, air and water pollution, and exposes workers and their families to harmful substances. The global demand for cobalt is being met at a tremendous human and environmental cost, in one of the world's poorest regions. We tend to think of solar panels as clean. But the truth is that they have an immense impact on humans and the environment. Now, nuclear energy sounds like the perfect solution. But looking at both sides is essential, and there's one minute problem. While moving from green energy has been pretty popular, moving to nuclear has been the opposite. I can imagine what you're thinking now, because this is what I was initially thinking. What about Chernobyl and Fukushima and all the other past historical nuclear accidents? While the numbers don't lie, the number of deaths related to nuclear power is minuscule compared to the number of deaths by most energy. For example, nuclear energy results in 99.9% fewer deaths than brown coal. With a death rate of only 0.03 deaths per terawatt hour, it would take 33 years for a single person to die as a result of nuclear energy. In addition, based on studies done by the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, concerns about cancer have been completely disproven. On the other hand, studies after study have shown that fossil fuels actually result in more deaths on public health. According to the World Health Organization, about 7 million people die annually from air pollution. In fact, nuclear energy has actually saved 2 million lives. But that's not something you hear about very often. And this raises the question of what if we continue increasing solar and wind energy like we are right now? Well, you remember I discussed France a little bit ago? Well, France primarily uses nuclear and hydro energy. One thing to consider is that nuclear power plants are big, steady engines that are great for providing constant amount of energy. However, if France wanted to use more solar and wind power, the amount of energy produced would not be consistent because it's sunny some days and it's windy others. So you would need a power source that can quickly adjust. And natural gas is like this. So when it's windy someday, you just turn up the gas. And when it's less sun and less wind, you can just turn it down. More sun and more wind, you can just turn it down. So if France relies more on solar and wind, they must use more natural gas to fill the gaps. And oil and gas companies know that if countries use more solar and wind, they'll need more natural gas. So these companies are investing in solar and wind projects because they know it will lead to more natural gas use, which is good for their business. After generations on the market, solar and wind provide just 3% of the world's energy needs. And that 3% is entirely dependent on fossil fuels for 24/7. Solar and wind are nowhere near able to replace the energy fossil fuels provide today, let alone the energy our world needs going forward. And now we can see this phenomenon at work internationally. If Germany hadn't closed its nuclear power plants, its emissions would be 43% lower than they are today. And if you care about climate change, that's something you have to consider, especially in light of some of the facts, the benefits and harms of these different energy sources. The good news is that people still care enough about nature for these facts to matter. In fact, a few weeks ago, 22 countries signed up to the global goal of tripling global nuclear emission capacity by 2050 at the UN's COP28 climate change conference. And this past year, we've seen a movement towards more investors in nuclear fund strategies in the US, which is expected to double the current nuclear output by 2050. And just this past week, China has begun construction on Pakistan's largest nuclear power plant. And in Ontario, the government just announced the start of planning for 3 nuclear power plants. And I'm not alone, nor do I feel alone, as I have one of the world's greatest environmentalists on my side, Greta Thunberg. But it's also understandable that as these facts have come to light, many of us have started questioning our prior beliefs and changing our mind. But for me, now the question is, now that we know that renewables can't save the planet, are we going to keep letting them destroy it? Thank you.